he's a Durlin or is wearing a changeling net or has been replaced by a pod or something like that. But
So
as far as
today-
I know, none of those are the case.
Today is a hyperbolic doubt day for you. Like
Huh? Yeah, this is my Cartesian doubt day.
Oh,
so.
okay, you're gonna go all the way there.
Yeah.
You notice anything different about me?
You're wearing earbuds.
Yeah, it's not very comfortable right now. It's caught on my back, but yeah,
Oh,
I decided
so
to try
they're
the
meant
Jimmy.
to wear on your front.
I know, but we thought we'd go with the. Nick and I were thinking we'd try it in the back, but what do you
Okay.
think, Nick? It's keep trying and
Keep trying.
see if I can keep practicing.
I wonder if you're wearing them on the back if you have to swap the left and right.
I
Given
looked
the way
at
the
the L
ears
and
are
the
shaped.
R,
Uh-huh.
and I have the R in my right and my L in my left, but I don't
it
know.
might be
what
more
the-
comfortable if you swapped them. I don't know. Just a thought.
Oh, are you supposed
Because
to
you're
have,
wearing them. I mean,
Here.
because they're designed to be worn from the front.
Are you supposed to have this part to the front of your ear or to the back of your ear?
You're supposed to have the. You're supposed to have the part with this little speaker.
Yeah.
Towards the back of your ear.
Oh, I have mine exactly wrong then.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, this is going really well.
You might want to reverse them.
All right, scratch that, reverse it, as Willy Wonka would say.
Did Willy Wonka say that?
Yeah,
Oh, I don't remember that part of the movie.
there's one. Yeah, where it's one of those under the breath kind of things.
Oh,
that,
okay.
What's his name? Gene Wilder.
I just remember Gene Wilder like giving that terrifying monologue when they're going through the thing and
I
you see
know.
all the really disturbing imagery in this children's movie.
Yeah, I know. That thing was. It's like that tunnel thing you're talking
Yeah, the
about. Yeah,
tunnel.
it was disturbing. Mm-hmm. This is not.
No,
Gonna
you
work.
see like a chicken getting its head cut off and stuff.
that part I don't remember.
Oh
You
yeah, it's
really
one
do?
of the images in the background.
This is terrible. Okay, now that's better.
Yeah.
Okay, that's better. No. Well, yeah, I probably do need help. But
So
I'm
we're
not gonna
experimenting live on air with our earbuds.
Yeah. Anything else you notice about me that's different?
You got a haircut?
I got my haircut.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
It looks like you got several of them cut.
Yeah,
in
almost
fact.
all of them, I think. Maybe all of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But I went to the barber and I said I wanted a number 3 buzz cut.
Okay, I used to get those.
And the guy apparently doesn't know what number 3 means because this is the number 1 buzz cut. It's really,
Is it?
really short. Yeah. Or maybe it's the number 2. I don't know. But it's definitely not.
You wanted
number
it
3.
somewhat longer than it
I,
actually
yeah.
is.
I usually, I don't, yeah. Right.
Okay.
I prefer not to see my
Well,
scalp.
the good news is it grows.
Yeah. So I was going to do the quiz again with you today, and,
Uh-huh,
and
cool.
again had a technical problem before
Oh.
coming in here.
Oh.
But Robert, the plant, has become very popular.
I know.
Yeah, he's become kind
I've
of a
been
public figure.
seeing a lot of people. So for people who may not know, this is Robert the Plant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think he needs his own show or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe we need to get another plant to keep him company. Or
Well, they have both genders, so he may be keeping himself company.
oh wait, the plant has both genders.
Plants have both genders. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a single flower has both genders.
Oh, like so there's not like a male, like I don't know, let's say oak tree and a female oak tree,
No, they have both.
but they pollinate one another.
Well, they do share genes around through pollination.
I
yeah.
see, yeah.
But a given flower will have both genders, and you can even see the parts. They have these little things that have the pollen on them, where the pollen comes from. Those are called anthers. That's the male part, and then the central thing that collects the pollen is the pestle, which is the female part.
Oh yeah, I think I learned that at some point, but I'm impressed that I'm actually not that impressed because you have you have a kind of impressive retention, don't you? Like what? I think most people would say, well, there must be a deficit somewhere. Then, like, are there
Sure.
things that you can't remember, like your grocery list or your
Well,
or
they're just things I've never learned, like sports stuff. I was talking to Tim Staples yesterday, and I forget the exact phrase he used, but it was something like take a verbal or something like that, and I had no idea.
called an audible.
Called an audible. Yeah, okay. So I had no idea, and he had to explain that this was a football reference. And it's like, okay,
Yeah, Philip Rivers does it all the time. Philip Rivers is the
he's a football guy.
a really good football guy for the San Diego Chargers, now the Los Angeles Chargers.
Uh-huh.
And now there's now San Diegans are like, am I still a fan? Am I not still a fan because they left me and they went to? But I don't care where I'm going to be their fan.
Okay.
But
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the only thing is football is becoming demonstrably dangerous to the mental health of the people who play it.
Becoming?
Well, I don't think it was demonstrably before.
Oh.
Like, I don't know that, but they have increasing biological evidence of the harm to people's brains. And
yeah.
that's definitely dampening enthusiasm for the game. You don't like to see that, so.
Well, maybe they can address that in some way.
Yeah, I think they should wear big
Better
giant
safety
helmets.
gear.
Yeah, I think they could have better safety gear, or maybe make them wear weights on their ankle. No, that wouldn't work. But it would actually work. It'd slow you down if you have to wear weights on your ankles. But I just made that one up, by the way. If I may have just solved
Hey.
the NFL's problem.
You
because
should get to
everyone-
a patent office quickly to get those football ankle weights patented.
Okay, I will. I'll do that right after.
Okay.
But you were going to say.
Oh, well, you were talking about memory, and so there are things that I've just never learned. Many, 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 many things I've never learned. But one thing I don't do is try to avoid learning stuff. There is have you ever, I don't know if you've ever read the Sherlock Holmes stories
No.
or not, but in the very first one, actually, I may have to backtrack on that one. But in one of the early ones, Sherlock is explaining his theory of memory to Dr. Watson. He thinks memory is like an attic, and that once you've filled it up, you
then
can't
you're-
remember anything
yeah,
more.
right.
And so Sherlock deliberately tries not to learn certain things. And so so Dr. Watson initially is aghast to learn that Sherlock has never heard of the heliocentric theory of the solar system.
Well, but maybe he did hear about it, but he just chose
Well,
to.
he says, what difference does it make if we go around the moon? It's not going to affect my detective work. and so now that I've learned this fact, I will endeavor to forget it so that it doesn't take up space in my memory. But that's not actually the way memory works. And that's actually been pointed out on some recent Sherlock things.
yeah?
On the American show Elementary,
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Watson is a medical doctor, I guess all versions of Dr. Watson. And when Sherlock tells her his attic theory of memory, she just looks at him and says, "That's not the way the memory works."
Oh, yeah.
But then in the British version, Sherlock's ignorance of astronomy becomes a plot point, because it turns out the case they're working on hinges on a point of astronomy, and he would have cracked it much sooner if he had known.
If he had bothered to remember it. Well, how do you think memory does work? I mean,
It's actually memory. The functioning of human memory is rather mysterious.
Yeah.
We're not sure. It seems to be encoded in certain parts of the brain, but in a way we don't fully understand yet. And unfortunately, there are some myths about how memory works, and there's myths about how the mind works in general and how the brain works. One that you've probably encountered is the idea that we only use 10% of our brain.
oh yeah, that's called the 10% myth, I think.
It's a total myth. It is not how our minds work. It's not how our brains work. And frankly, if you turned on every neuron in your brain all at once, it would be really bad. So,
Well, you chew up enormous amounts of energy because your brain is an
well,
energy.
you'd be.
But
I
it would
would think
hurt.
it would be unsafe.
Yeah. Well, the 10% myth persists, and people. I don't know. I cannot find my pedal. What happened? Oh, now we moved it.
Oh, you moved well, my pedal was moved too.
Yeah.
For people who don't know what we were talking about, these are the secret unseen cough pedals that we use. We step on them to temporarily cancel. There's one of them. I actually don't like that one. It's got the big square button that's harder to hit with your foot. And be sure that it's
I've been
gone
thinking
down.
about going to. I used to use a hand one, but when I came here to Catholic Answers, you all had the foot ones. But I
Yeah.
like having it where I can
Like
press it with my
this.
hand.
This I like because you just have to hit that button and it works. It's much easier than trying to mash down on that big square button that has the plastic frame around it.
And then you never know.
You
have
never
I
know,
actually
yeah.
suppressed it? So you have this worry, like I have to cough now. It's sometimes called a cough button, and I
Yeah.
have to cough now, but then I'm not sure is the button off or not. So I push the cough button, and then I'm like over here. But anyway,
So
bit of
this
studio.
is a day for multiple experimentations
Yeah.
with our audio equipment.
look at this.
Oh,
I
you
just
got it unplugged.
That's all right. I can still hear you. I just can't hear Nick now.
Oh, okay.
I'll get it straightened out.
One could make a joke about such a thing, but
Wait, I felt
one
like there
is
was
not inclined to.
something that you were going to say before we got off on memory. Oh yeah, myths about memory. Oh, you said there's a lot of myths about memory, but you said
And
one of
about-
them is the 10%.
Well, no,
Rule, but-
about the brain in general.
Oh, about the brain, yeah.
And there's lots of other myths you hear out there, like one of them is that Eskimos have an abnormal number of words for snow.
Oh yeah, right.
Actually not true. We've got, we've got,
Come on, Eskimos.
they do have multiple words for snow, but so do we. If you go like to a ski lodge or something,
Right.
they've got hard pack and soft pack and all these different kinds
Powder.
of, yeah.
Right.
And so but Eskimos don't have an abnormal number of them. It is true, however, that the Ferengi have a prodigious number of words for rain.
And why is that? It just rains a lot on.
It rains a lot on
Ferenginar?
Ferenginar.
Let me ask you this, and we have a few minutes left in the pre-show, and this is a serious question, so I want to
Okay.
give you some time to answer it. Could you explain in detail how our immortal soul, our rational soul, interacts with our material brain?
Not
got 3
not in
minutes.
detail.
No, no.
No.
Do you have any?
I mean, so you asked me the question, could you? And I just answered it not in detail.
Okay, give me some kind of answer though. I'd like to
Okay.
know what your
Well,
view of
so
that is.
the technical definition of the way the term soul is used in theology is it's the substantial form of the human body. And that means it has a relationship not just with the brain, but with the entire body. Nevertheless, there seems to be a privileged relationship between the brain and the soul, which is the seat of reason. There's a close correspondence with them, such that our brain, in some way, on the neurological level, mirrors our thought process. And precisely how the two interrelate is unclear, but it's obviously very tight because you can do things to the brain that will affect our thought process. And this has been known, this is not a new discovery. This is something that's been known since forever because people since forever have been getting drunk.
Yeah.
And so it's been known all the way down through human history that you can introduce certain chemicals into the human body, whether it's alcohol or the chemical in khat, which is a kind of plant they chew in the Middle East, or whether it's the chemicals in marijuana or whatever it is. You can introduce chemicals into your body that will affect mental function. So there's obviously, since the soul is related not just to the body in terms of being its substantial form, which is doesn't mean its shape, but it means the thing that gives it its identity and its function. It's obviously a very tight relationship. Since bodily states can influence mental behavior.
I still don't know how the brain interacts with.
Tightly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But for just a second, I think my brain might not have been interacting with my soul there for a second. It seems like
You need to slip the clutch?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly it. Slip the clutch.
That's a square dance move, by the way.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I have I drive a manual transmission. Do you?
No, not these days.
And third gear doesn't work very well.
Oh.
Slip that thing all the time.
Okay.
And it makes an ugly sound. I think we have to.
Fire bad.
Yeah. I think we have to. What do we got to do? We got to be quiet.
Got to be quiet now.
Oh, okay. We got to be quiet, and then the regular radio show starts. So we'll see you then.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
It's Thursday. That means open forum. 2 hours of open forum today. That means any question you've got on our Catholic faith and what we believe, why we came to believe it, what the history of that belief growing across the world is. We're happy to take any of those questions. We like to answer questions about the Catholic faith. The number 888-318-7884 or 888-31-TRUTH. It's the same number, just one has letters and one has numbers. Our guest this hour, Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers Live and the author of A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist.
So how is it the same number if one of them has letters?
Wait, no.
You said it's the same number, it's just one has letters.
But you use the letters
It wouldn't
as
be the same number. It wouldn't have the same numbers if it's using letters.
It's the same number because in this case, the letters just direct you to which number to push.
Oh, so it's like a number that's been masked with letters.
It's a number that's been, no, more like unmasked with numbers. Like it shows you which number to push. If
the numbers are masked. And when you
when I say it,
truth,
yeah, 888-31-TRUTH.
I'm just giving you a hard time, but that's my job, so
Somebody said one day when I was saying that, and somebody here in the studio at some point said, but young people don't know about the letters on their phones because they don't have that on cell phones, and so we all had to get out our cell phones. We had to check.
How do you think they text?
But it turns out the numbers are still there. But it used to be like you would say like I don't know, Pennsylvania
5,000.
Yeah,
that's
right.
a famous song.
Right, like, but what did that mean? Like Pennsylvania, you actually dialed in a PA?
No, no. So that's how the numbers got their start on the phone, because originally they had what were known as phone exchanges that were identified with letters rather than numbers, and eventually, so you had on the phone both the letters and the numbers, so you could dial in the exchange like PA for Pennsylvania, and then 5,000 for the rest of the number. And eventually, the habit of identifying phone exchanges that way went away, and so they just went straight to using numbers. So you wouldn't dial you would dial the same numbers for the P and the A, but it wouldn't be like written that way in the phone book or advertised that way on the radio.
All right, Pennsylvania 6.
But it was a way, because if you used that kind of numerical or that letter-based identification of the phone exchange you're calling, it can be easier to remember, especially in advertising. I mean, it's easier to remember Pennsylvania 65000 than it would be to remember 9650000, whatever.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, I remember the song Pennsylvania 65000, but I don't remember what they were dialing in that. Do you happen to remember?
Well,
it's
I
the
don't.
number for something.
I don't remember what the number was for. By the way, I do remember an old cartoon where the exchange you were supposed to dial was Bilgewater. And it's like Bilgewater in some number, and I remember the guy in the cartoon doing it in kind of a great Gildersleeve voice. Bilgewater, so and so.
No, we've lost that, but we didn't lose the letter number correlation. It's still there on your cell phone. It's right there.
That's why you can text.
Well, now actually texting is a separate function.
You can do it another thing, but yeah.
Pennsylvania 6. Oh, so it's a 888-31-TRUTH. If you want to look at the numbers on your phone. I always try to start with you, Jimmy, with a question from your book, A Daily Defense.
Okay.
366 different challenges to the Catholic faith, and then a few paragraphs of response to that challenge. I open randomly just now to day 211, the imposter hypothesis.
Oh.
The challenge is this. The Gospels say the disciples had difficulty recognizing Jesus after the resurrection. So maybe he wasn't maybe he was actually replaced by a hypothesis.
By a hypothesis?
By an imposter.
By an imposter.
No, he was not replaced by a hypothesis.
Okay.
I apologize.
So there are a number of things to be said here. The first one is they don't, in every case where they appear to have difficulty recognizing Jesus, it's very temporary. And in two of the three cases, it doesn't seem to be strange at all when you actually read the passages. Now, in one place on the road to Emmaus, there are disciples who are miraculously kept from recognizing Jesus for a time, but then they do recognize him. And so exactly what happened on this on this occasion is a little unclear. Some have interpreted it as meaning Jesus took on a different physical form and then he reverted to his normal physical form. Well, no imposter from planet Earth can do that. So the imposter theory wouldn't fit there.
That you know of.
Another way of looking at it is they had a condition that was supernaturally caused, but is an otherwise known condition known as prosopagnosia. Prosopagnosia is also called face blindness. People who suffer from this condition can see your face perfectly well, but something in their brain doesn't put the pieces together to identify you. And so it could be that they were just miraculously kept from recognizing him, but then they did, and that's the point. Whatever interpretation you take of this, they then do recognize him. The other cases are even more natural in their explanation. Mary Magdalene apparently isn't looking at Jesus when she first hears his voice, but then she turns and recognizes him. And when the disciples are on the Sea of Galilee, they're off in the distance and they hear Jesus' voice, and then they recognize him and draw close enough to see him. And so, we don't have a pattern here of people who see somebody and don't recognize him as Jesus and then conclude he must be Jesus even though he doesn't look like Jesus.
Right.
So he doesn't appear to be an imposter. Also, this isn't the fact that Jesus came back from the dead isn't the only relevant thing going on here. If there were just an imposter replacing Jesus, that wouldn't explain the empty tomb. So why didn't the Jewish authorities go to the tomb and say, well, here's the body. Obviously, your imposter is not Jesus raised from the dead. He's just an imposter. Right. Also, imposters, at least ones from the planet Earth, can't ascend into the sky. And so
and that's a big part of the story.
That's kind of a big part of the story.
Yeah.
And so the imposter hypothesis at most explains a tiny number of things that really have viable alternative explanations, and in no way explains the complete experience that the apostles had.
Sir, and wouldn't you think in Mary Magdalene's case, at least too, she really is not expecting to meet him at all.
She's not expecting. She thinks his body has been stolen.
Right. So she would look past, not look past so much, but not
expect, not anticipate.
Yeah, so not be looking for that face. So kind of dismiss who's ever around in her grief or her upset or whatnot.
She's probably crying too, which also didn't help with what she could see.
Right. 888-318-7884 is the number. If you dial Pennsylvania 65000, you will not get us, but if you dial 888-31-TRUTH, you will. Jimmy, how about we try to take a quick question here before we go to the break? Morrow in Pembroke, Florida, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Your question for Jimmy Aiken.
Hello, guys. How are you guys doing?
Really good, Morrow. How are you?
Great. I'm awesome. Glad to be on the air. Have your book, Jimmy. Great book. I will endorse it for all the listeners to purchase Daily Defense. It is a wonderful book.
Thank you.
But my question is, so basically I'm opening up dialogue with my non-Catholic girlfriend, and the first topic we're going to discuss is the real presence of the Eucharist.
Okay.
What I wanted to do is I kind of know what argument she's going to counter to what I'm saying, because I know I've already shown her John 6. And basically, one of the verses that she's going to, I think, come into to contend me with is the verse, I believe it's verse 62 or 63, where Jesus says, these words I'm speaking to you are of the Spirit, whereas the flesh is of no avail. So I think she's going to say, well, you see, this is about the Spirit of Jesus, not about his actual body and flesh, know. And then I also think she's going to say, well, a year later at the Last Supper, when Jesus fulfilled his promise that he made that day, it came in the form of bread and wine, but it wasn't actually his flesh, and it wasn't actually his blood. So clearly he couldn't have been speaking literally. He was speaking symbolically.
All right, Morrow, I think it's pretty clear there, Morrow. Let's let Jimmy take a stab at those.
In regard to the first passage, it's true that Jesus does say at one point that my words are spirit and life, and the flesh is of no avail. And the question is, what does he mean by that? Some people have proposed that by saying they're spirit, that he means they're symbolic. but the word spirit does not normally mean symbolic in Greek. In fact, that would be a very strange usage for the word pneuma. If you take that statement in the broader context of John and in the broader context of the New Testament, you discover that there's a different meaning that suggests itself. Elsewhere in John, Jesus is talking to his opponents and he says, you judge according to the flesh, meaning according to a human capacity, according to a human reasoning that judges by externals, not based on what God's Spirit would lead you to believe. And you find similar usage in St. Paul, where he talks about how the things of God are spiritually discerned and they don't make sense to the carnal man or the fleshly man. And so when you see this contrast between flesh and spirit, in terms of understanding, the difference is not being drawn between symbolic and literal. The difference is being drawn between what God would lead you to believe versus what your ordinary human mode of reasoning, just based on your senses and external appearances, would tell you. And so when Jesus therefore is talking about you must eat my flesh and drink my blood and so forth, he's indicating a realistic point of view regarding the sacrament, which divine grace would lead you to, but is not the point of view that your senses and your ordinary human reason would lead you to, because it obviously still appears to just be bread and wine. But if he meant it was symbolic, then we've got a problem in this very passage in John 6, because many of the disciples that he had, John tells us, cease following him at this point, and he turns to the core disciples and says, do you also want to leave? So instead of saying, as he did on other occasions, hey guys, I was talking symbolically, like he did, for example, when he spoke about the leaven of the Pharisees and they thought he somehow meant literal bread. Well, in this case, he doesn't do that. He doesn't say, I was just using a figure. Instead, he says, do you want to go too? He's willing to lose even his core disciples if they don't accept his truth. And he's actually, in context, repeatedly reiterated this. It's not just one saying. When he gets resistance on the saying, he reiterates it several times, and then finally is willing to lose these disciples, even his core ones. And Peter at that point says, well, Lord, you have the words of eternal life. So even though it's hard for them to accept, they recognize this spiritual perspective that Jesus has alluded to, that he does have words from the Holy Spirit that lead to eternal life. And so they're willing to accept them, even though they're difficult from a point of view of human reason. In terms of the Last Supper, well, he does use bread and wine as the elements which he consecrates, but he doesn't say this represents my body and this represents my blood. He says this is my body and this is my blood. The question is whether or not you're going to take that as a symbol or in a realistic way. From a modern perspective, where we live in a very secular age that is disinclined to see miracles, it can be understandable that people would look at that, some of them, and say, well, he's being symbolic. But that's not the age in which Jesus was living, and that's not who the core disciples he said this to were. They were men who believed in miracles and who had seen Jesus perform miracles and who had performed miracles themselves after being authorized by Jesus to do so. And so they would be much more open to the idea that what he's proclaiming here is not simply a symbol, it's actually a miracle. And when you look at the whole sweep of what the New Testament has to say, and even beyond that, what the Church Fathers have to say, it's clear that the early Church understood this in a realistic sense. If you'd like more information about that, go by Catholic.com. We have a number of tracts in the online library, including some quotations from the early Church Fathers.
Thanks very much, Mauro. We have to zip off to a break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
Call and ask Jimmy your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
As legend goes, it was 500 years ago that Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral, setting of a series of ruptures that the Church suffers to this very day. Catholic Answers magazine is marking the anniversary with our very special issue delving deep into the Protestant Reformation. Want to be sure to get your copy? Subscribe right now to the best Catholic apologetics magazine anywhere by calling 818-487-2011 or going to Catholic.com. The heroes of the Counter-Reformation, the deadly errors of sola fide, and everything you want to know about how the Reformation played out. Just a few of the articles you can look forward to. Don't wait another moment to subscribe. Call 818-487-2011 or go to the shop at Catholic.com right now to get subscriptions for yourself and those you love. Share the faith. Defend the faith. Catholic Answers Magazine from Catholic Answers, the most trusted name in Catholic apologetics.
The Catholic Answers Minute. I'm Father Vincent Serpa. In Matthew 13:10, the disciples asked Jesus, "Why do you speak to the crowds in parables?" He replied, "Because knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven has been granted to you, but to them it has not been granted." That is why he spoke to them in parables, because they looked but did not see, and heard but did not listen or understand. They were simply not capable of absorbing all that he had to say. So he gave them what they could understand. So with us, he gives us what we can understand and need for the moment. This is probably why he doesn't tell us the future, and also why there is so much mystery in our lives. We are just not capable of understanding the whole picture now. Besides, the act of trusting him about what we don't understand does us much good. It provides us with another means of showing our love for him. I'm Father Vincent Serpa for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, is our guest for this entire hour. Next hour, Jim Blackburn will be here. It's all open forum. Any question you have on the life or faith of the Catholic Church, you don't have to be Catholic to call. We welcome questions, comments, even challenges from any direction. Happy to take those. 888-318-7884. We go now to Brian in Los Angeles, California, listening on Immaculate Heart Radio. Brian, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So in paragraph 1950 of the Catechism, it contains the sentence, quote, "The moral law is the work of divine wisdom," end quote. That is, as I understand it, the Church holds that the moral law is grounded in God. So in thinking about this, I've come across a convincing objection, and I was wondering if you might address it.
Sure.
The objection goes like this. The moral law must be grounded in reason and not in God. For one, we cannot cognize God as he exists, but our conception of God is always mediated through reason. And two, we always check the prescriptions of alleged divine revelation against the dictates of moral principles in our reason, so that we can distinguish, for example, between true revelation and false prophecies. Therefore, reason, rather than God, seems to be the final arbiter and therefore the ultimate ground of the moral law.
Who are you reading there?
I've been studying philosophy. I've been studying the work of Immanuel Kant, and specifically his groundwork. And Kant maintains that the moral law is grounded in reason simpliciter, whereas the Catholic Church holds that God is ultimately the ground. So there's a bit of a contradiction there.
But is that a quote from Kant you're reading there?
No. This is. I wrote the question before, and this is my own words. I just wrote it because it's complicated, so I wanted to ask the question in the right way.
Sure, no problem. So the way you posed the question, it's true that we know the moral law by reason, but saying that doesn't enable you to say that reason is the ground of moral law. Just like I may know that Cy is wearing a blue shirt by my senses, but that doesn't mean my senses are the basis of the fact that he's wearing a blue shirt. He's wearing a blue shirt because he put on a blue shirt this morning. And in the same way, I may apprehend or know or cognize the moral law by the use of human reason, but that doesn't mean it's based on human reason. That's the means by which I know it. So that would be the basic answer to the question as you posed it. I could go somewhat further and note that what you're dealing with here sounds like a variation of a theme that actually predates Immanuel Kant by quite a long ways, in fact, by around 2,000 years. It's what's sometimes known as the Euthyphro dilemma. During his literary career, Plato wrote a number of dialogues about Socrates. Some of them incorporated things that the historical Socrates had actually done. In others, Socrates basically becomes a mouthpiece for Plato. But one of those dialogues, one of the earlier ones that may actually have some connection to the historical Socrates, is a dialogue called the Euthyphro. Euthyphro is another character in the dialogue. And during the course of this dialogue, Socrates discusses with the other characters what the ground of goodness is, or what the ground of piety is. And the one of the answers that's initially proposed is that pious is whatever the gods say is pious. So it's a kind of divine command theory of morality. But Socrates then points out, well, that would kind of make it arbitrary. What's moral, and so another theory gets entertained, which is that that what is pious is what the gods love, and so it's something that seems at that point independent of the gods. If something's good and the gods love it, and that's what identifies it as good, well, then it seems to be good independently of the gods. And so there is this question of the relationship between moral goodness and other things, for that matter, reason itself, and God. And the Christian solution that's most common, and the one that the Catechism is endorsing here, is that ultimately moral goodness is grounded in God's own nature. And, to extend it a little bit, so is reason. God is the ultimate ground of rationality. And so, it's from a Catholic perspective, it's true that that moral goodness is grounded in God's nature, so what's ultimately good is something that corresponds with God's own goodness. It's also true that what's ultimately reasonable is something that corresponds with God's own reason, with God's own nature. And it may be the case that we apprehend what's good by the use of reason, but that doesn't make the use of reason the basis of what is good, any more than it makes reason the basis of anything else we discern by reason. Reason is the means, in this case, not the ground.
I see. And does it follow then that the criterion for pleasing God is being morally good as we understand it with our reason?
That's what humans need to do, yeah. We need to use our reason to discern what's morally good and do that, and to the extent we do that, we please God.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you very, very much, Brian, for that call. 888-318-7884, the number, if you have any question about the Catholic faith, or in this case, about philosophy, about morality. We're happy to take those calls. Nathan Poe's mom is on the phone. Nathan Poe
awesome.
Works here. And
he's call screening today.
And he's call screening. So I don't know if he called his mom or if she called us. But Rochelle...
Moms love to call in and put their sons on the spot.
You're right here in San Diego. Rochelle, I wonder if you can get your question in for Jimmy, and we'll answer it after the break.
Okay. I called in. He didn't call me.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So my question is, as a Protestant, I was wondering, what if the Pope, let's say I become Catholic, what if the Pope makes a weird political statement that you think is kind of unnecessary and you may not agree with? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, all countries should provide blank for their people. Blank meaning fill in the blank.
Okay.
Yep.
How would you respond? Okay, how would you respond to about your leader? The reason why is because as a Protestant, we just move on to the next church where they're not talking like that.
Okay.
Fair enough. Nathan Poe's mom. Hang on a second. We'll be right back with Nathan Poe's friend, Jimmy Akin, answering that question. 888-318-7884. Our number. This is Catholic Answers Live, open forum, and we'll be right back.
Dr. Ray Guarendi.
I was raised in an Italian Catholic home. We went to church. That's what you did. And now that I'm older, I can't thank my parents enough for allowing me to know about our Lord, because ultimately the base that they gave me kept pulling me back to the Catholic Church, even though I wandered as a young adult.
The Doctor is In with Ray Guarendi. Weekdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Hello, my friends. This is Catholic Answers President Christopher Check, and I'm here to tell you about a unique resource just out from Catholic Answers Press. One of the ways Jesus answered his critics was to use their own words against them, showing how even the enemies of the faith admitted crucial facts that undermined their own positions. And it's been that way through the ages. It's proved impossible for those out to destroy the faith to mount their attacks without tripping themselves up and inadvertently testifying to the truth of what they're trying to destroy. In his new book, Hostile Witnesses: How the Historic Enemies of the Church Prove Christianity, renowned author Gary Michuta looks at dozens of Christianity's most notorious foes from biblical times to the present day and draws from their antagonistic words and deeds surprising testimony to gospel truths. Rich in research and written with clarity and force, Hostile Witnesses is a unique contribution to Catholic apologetics and one that speaks with special urgency to a modern world in which the faith is under attack like never before. If you love apologetics, you need to order your copy of Hostile Witnesses today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for this book at a Catholic bookstore in your area.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're giving away a free download of an MP3 or a download of a free MP3 by Trent Horn and Patrick Madrid. When you sign up for the Catholic Answers Live newsletter, you just text the word Madrid to 44222 on your cell phone, and then we send you a little directions about how to get it, and you get to download this free MP3, The Communion of Saints and Purgatory, with Trent Horn and Patrick Madrid, two of the finest apologists you're going to find out there in the world today. And so this is kind of cool to have them together talking about the Communion of Saints and Purgatory. Madrid is the word, M-A-D-R-I-D. Text it to the number 44222, and you are signed up. Our guest this hour, Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, and we were talking to Nathan Poe's mom when we went to the break, and she wants to know, essentially, you can correct me, Nathan Poe's mom, if I get this wrong, but what if the Pope says makes some strange political pronouncement, and you're a Catholic? What do you do about that? Am I in the ballpark?
Correct, because I'm realizing that as a Protestant, I would usually have options. Mm-hmm. And now if I think this is the church, there's no option. That's right. My leader.
Yeah.
And so, but what if I think my leader's not, I don't agree with him?
Yeah. Well, the situation is essentially the same one that Christians faced in the first century. I mean, there was only the one church. Jesus founded it. He made Peter the leader of it. And if Peter said or did something that was strange, it could put people in an unusual position, and they wouldn't always be sure how to react. The basic disposition would be approach the situation the same way as if your father had done something strange. This is based on a principle that's applied in a somewhat different context by St. Paul when he's talking to St. Timothy, and he's talking to Timothy about how to deal with elders or presbyters in the church, and he says, deal with them the way you would a father. So you want to be respectful. You want to. It doesn't mean just always accepting whatever they've said, but you want to be respectful in how you approach them with proper reverence for the position they have in God's church. And so the same thing would be the case with the Pope. If the Pope has said something strange of a political nature, then you want to be respectful. You don't want to be publicly dissing him the same way you wouldn't want to be publicly dissing your father. That's not in keeping with honor your father and mother. But, you do have the gift of reason, and as long as he's not teaching something as a matter of doctrine, especially an infallible doctrine, then there is some flexibility available. If it's something that's of a purely political nature, like, every country ought to provide blankets for its people or something like that, well, I would say look for what truth is there, but recognize that there can be limits, to the way a truth is expressed, especially if it's just a short statement like that. It's a good, if I were to say every country should provide blankets for its people. Well, okay, there's a truth there. People need blankets. And the state has a responsibility for promoting the common good. And so one way or another, a given state, would want to do what it can to provide people with adequate blankets. Now, there are a bunch of questions about how exactly that's supposed to happen. In some cases, it could be the state, promotes a market environment where people earn money and buy blankets and take care of themselves, and maybe there's a safety net for people who have problems, doing that. But on balance, the best way to provide blankets for people could be for the state to get out of the way, rather than trying to administer every blanket individually with some massive bureaucracy. On the other hand, there could be states where, let's say, you've got a very dire emergency that's just hit the state. I mean, suppose it's a very small state and there's just been a hurricane or something that's just devastated. Maybe the state needs to, get a bunch of blankets from the International Red Cross and hand them out individually in the emergency. So there can be a variety of different ways that this can happen, but there's an underlying truth here that there's a good that the state would want to promote as part of its job in promoting the common good. But so that's how I would look at it. I would say, first, I want to be respectful. Second, I want to look for what truth is here. Then I want to look at also what are the limitations in the way the truth has been expressed, because obviously if the Pope just says states need to provide their citizens with blankets, that doesn't tell us how or under what circumstances or all the complex dynamics that would be involved there. He's not addressing those. He's made a very limited statement. And then I would say, what's the doctrinal status of this? I mean, there may be a moral teaching under there that is a matter of doctrine, like the state has the responsibility for promoting the common good, but then there can be a lot of contingent elements that are not matters of doctrine. And so on things that are not properly speaking matters of doctrine, I'm not under an obligation to accept those. The Pope has doctrinal teaching authority, but not political teaching authority. It gets a little dicey because moral principles, which he does have the ability to address doctrinally, get embedded with politics, but purely speaking properly, he doesn't have the ability to just settle every political question out there. Also, I'd ask, well, what's the level of authority that's invested in this? If it's something that he said in an encyclical, obviously it would need to be taken with more weight than if it's something he said in an interview with a newspaper. And if he's just talking to a newspaper, it's not official church teaching at all. It's just his private opinion, at least based on the form in which the statement is made. So there are a number of different things there, but ultimately you want to be respectful. You want to be looking for what's the truth and that's being expressed here, but then you also want to recognize the limitations, both on the way that truth is being expressed and on the level of authority the statement may have. It may not, in fact, have any authority in terms of being church teaching.
How does that strike you, Nathan Postbaum?
Well, I think I understand what he's saying. What happens when you have a priest in your area who goes astray and who's allowing literally ungodly practices? So let's say you're in that parish, and now the priest is saying such and such is okay.
Okay.
That we know totally is wrong.
Right.
Now,
So in that case, what you'd want to do is talk to the priest initially, and if you don't, this is based on what Jesus says to do in Matthew 18. If someone is sinning against you, like telling you false things and telling the congregation false things, you'd want to do what you can to talk to him individually. If that doesn't work, you move it up the ladder. And in a Catholic context, that means reporting him to the bishop. In terms of, do you have to stay in the parish? No, you don't. You're able to go to any Catholic church and fulfill your obligations as a Catholic there. You're not bound to go to your territorial parish or to any particular church. You're not free to leave the Catholic Church altogether, because that would be contrary to Christ's will, but you're not bound to any particular parish. And so if you and a particular priest are at loggerheads, you're certainly free to go elsewhere and continue living life as a Catholic.
Thank you, Nathan Poe's mom. Will you call us again?
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Very good. It was great talking with you. 888-318-7884 is the number. Jimmy, I'm happy to hear you're pro-blanket. I'm a little more of a statist when it comes to blankets, I think. You're a free marketeer when it comes to blankets?
I didn't take a position there.
It seemed like you were... Well, okay, that's true. You probably didn't take a position. But I would like to be... My wife takes the blankets a lot, and I would like to be able to call the sheriff about that. I believe the government getting involved in that would be...
I think you should keep the government out of your bedroom.
I'm sorry. We better take a break on that one. I have to have a talk with you, Jimmy Akin. We'll be right back with more Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
We'll be right back with more great answers from Jimmy today on Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, my friends. This is Christopher Check, president of Catholic Answers. In 1 Corinthians, St. Paul exhorts Christians to have no dissensions among themselves and to be united in the same mind. And yet, since Martin Luther's rebellion exactly 500 years ago, the apostles' injunction seems to have gone unheeded. What is the faithful Catholic who desires Christian unity to do? Join us at the Catholic Answers National Conference this September 28th to 30th, right here in San Diego. The theme of the conference is the reunion of all Christians. If you want to learn how to evangelize our separated brethren with charity, you don't want to miss this conference, featuring all your favorite Catholic Answers speakers and some superb guests, too. Registration is priced lower than last year, and we have an even lovelier hotel with a better room rate. And September is the very best month to visit San Diego. For all the details, visit CatholicAnswersConference.com. Early bird registration savings expire July 2nd. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com and register today.
Pope Francis said, "The key that opens the door to the faith is prayer." Join St. Paul Street Evangelization by running a prayer station in the public square. You don't need to be a professional apologist or theologian. Just listen to the needs of the people you encounter. Offer encouragement, take prayer requests, and pray with people. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Homeschool Connections has recently formed a partnership featuring a dual enrollment program with Franciscan University of Steubenville. Our website is homeschoolconnections.com. We are a proud sponsor of Catholic Answers Live.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour, taking your calls, taking your questions from the internet as well on any question you've got on the life or faith of the Catholic Church. Jimmy, someone asked a question on Facebook, and hi to everybody watching on Facebook or YouTube or Periscope. And I'm sorry that I can't find the person right now, so maybe you type his name in, or I think it was a he, as I asked the question. But it was, I actually am fascinated by this question.
Okay.
Does the Bible mention unicorns? And if it does, what's it talking about?
Okay. Well, if you look in some translations of the Bible, you will find passages that mention unicorns. In the King James Version and in the Douay-Rheims version, you'll find unicorns referenced in both of those translations. For example, in the Douay-Rheims, Psalm 91, verse 11, the psalmist is talking about what God's going to do for him, and he says, "But my horn shall be exalted like that of the unicorn." And in the equivalent verse, which in the King James Version is Psalm 92, verse 10, because there's a difference in the numbering of the Psalms, it says, "But my horn shalt thou exalt like the horn of an unicorn." And so, yeah, you do have some references to unicorns in some of these Bible translations. The question is then, well, does that imply this is a real animal? And it doesn't necessarily, because the Bible does refer to animals that, to kind of mythical animals in a literary way. Like, I don't have to, for example, really believe in let's say, zombies, to say, oh man, Nick Chamberlain's baby kept him up last night crying. He was wandering around the office like a zombie today. I can.
That's every day.
I can make.
I
Yeah,
don't know
well,
what
he's
he's
got a
talking
new
about.
baby, so I could make a reference to zombies without implying there really are zombies.
Yeah, right.
And the Bible has the same liberty, and it does refer like to dragons and things like that. And we don't have to say, well, that really means dinosaurs. We can say, no, it means dragons.
Yeah.
But in the case of unicorns, it could be doing that. But there's actually a very interesting case that it's not, that it may be referring to a real animal. Unicorn is just the English translation, but if I recall correctly, in the Greek Septuagint translation of these psalms, the word is monokeros, which is like, it basically means unicorn, one horn, and and you find the interesting thing is you find other ancient writers talking about unicorns as if they're real animals. Pliny the Elder, Roman naturalist, he wrote a series of books called Natural History, in which he described the world as it was understood in his day, including all the different animals and plants and things that lived in it. And he talks about unicorns living in India. And he describes the physical characteristics of a unicorn, and he describes them in such a way that it's obvious to a modern person that he's talking about an Indian rhinoceros.
Oh.
And if you think about it, rhinoceri do have one horn on their nose. And so to some folks in the ancient world, they'll write about rhinoceroses using that as a designation because it's one of their prominent characteristics. They've got this one horn on their nose. And so it may be that that's what the psalmist is talking about as well. And if you'd like to read more about this or learn more about this, just type in Jimmy Akin unicorns on Google, and I've got a blog post about this with a video I did on YouTube. You can also go to my YouTube channel, which is like YouTube/Jimmy Akin, and I've got a video on there called "Are There Unicorns in the Bible?" And I go through Pliny the Elder's description of unicorns and then show you how it matches up to a rhinoceros.
Indian unicorn, Indian rhinoceros. So does that mean then by kind of a logical progression then that the Indian rhinoceros is a magical creature? If I lasso it, it has to grant me a wish.
This is an empirical question, so I suggest
we
try it and see if it
Thanks,
works.
Jimmy. Oh yeah. So okay. Yes. Thank you. So you're sending me to India to lasso a rhino. Thank you, Jimmy Akin. That was Jeff, by the way, on Facebook. I don't know why I lost the name at first, but that was Jeff. And thanks, Jeff, for that question. And now you know. We go now to Nathan in Tomball, Texas, listening on the EWTN app. Nathan, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hey, I'm going to switch it off speakerphone because I don't like that. There we go.
Okay.
Hey, guys. All right. Okay, so I just had one quick question about the, Protestants always claim that Jesus said, "This represents my body." The quick question is the word represent, is there a Greek equivalent to that's ever used in Scripture that we could compare to, that he could have used if he just meant that?
Oh, sure. I don't have it on the top of my head. I'd have to look it up. But there are ways in every human language to explicitly call out the concept of symbolism. One of the ways that actually is done sometimes in Scripture is speaking of things as a figure. And so he could have said, this is a figure of my body or something like that. But every human language has a way to call attention to the fact that a symbol is being used. So it could have been this represents, this symbolizes, this is a figure. Any number of things could do that.
Nathan?
Alrighty then. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so that was my quick question. May I shoot the main one at you now?
Okay.
Regarding...
Can you talk right into the phone? We're having a little trouble hearing.
There we go. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so in regards regarding baptism, there's a translation, the NIV, which is kind of notorious for poorly translating words. I understand paradosis, I believe.
Right.
Tradition and so on.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, they use the word what symbolizes baptism that now saves you. The equivalent word, I believe, in the RSV is. I'm wondering
Nathan, you're really cutting in and out there. Can you talk directly into the phone, please?
Just real quick with the question directly into the phone so we can get that.
Yes. Okay, so the RSV uses corresponds. This corresponds to baptism, whereas NIV says symbolizes. So I'm wondering on the Greek root of that word, Greek origin.
Okay. So as I understand what Nathan is asking, he's asking about 1 Peter 3:21, where it says, baptism now saves you. And in the context, Peter is... this is a smaller statement within a larger context. Peter talks about how in the ark, in Noah's ark, there were 8 people who were saved through water, which corresponds to baptism, which now saves you. And so Nathan is asking about the word that gets translated as corresponds or represents or something like that in these different translations. He mentions the New International Version, which does have some translator bias in it at times. He mentions the word paradosis, which is the word for tradition. And what the NIV, this is a Protestant translation, what the New International Version does with paradosis is whenever tradition is being spoken of in a negative sense, it translates it as tradition. So it sounds bad. But then whenever paradosis is being spoken of in a positive sense, it doesn't translate it tradition, it translates it teachings.
That's just sneaky.
Some translator bias.
Yeah.
So I guess Nathan is wondering, is there translator bias here? The word that's used that's getting translated as represent or correspond to in Greek is antitupon, which means, if you wanted to translate it kind of hyperliterally, it would be, which is the antitype of baptism, or is antitypically baptism, or something along those lines. It's an adjective, the way it's being used here. But you could say it's typical of baptism. But to my mind, it doesn't really matter how that's translated, because he's not saying that the act of... This isn't like the Eucharist where Jesus says, this is my body, and it all hinges on what does is mean. The identification here is obviously one of comparison. Peter is comparing what happened in the ark when 8 people were saved through water to baptism, which now saves you. And so he's drawing a parallel between these two. He could have expressed that in any number of ways. He happens to say it's antitypical of that, or he could have said it corresponds to, or it's figurative of, or parallels, or any number of things. But from an apologetics perspective, in terms of the apologetics of baptism, the key thing is baptism now saves you. That's the money statement. And that's what is the most important thing Peter is wanting his audience to understand. In fact, some people have suggested that 1 Peter was actually, before it was a letter, that it was actually a baptismal homily that Peter gave because of how prominent the theme of baptism is in it. And so, it does compare baptism to what happened in Noah's Ark, but the money statement is baptism now saves you.
Nathan, thanks so much for that call. We go now to Troy in Tulsa, Oklahoma, watching on YouTube. Hi, Troy. Your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, Jimmy. I'm a longtime listener, big fan of the show.
Awesome. What can we do for you?
Well, my question is, I've recently gotten into a discussion with a Southern Baptist over the idea of baptism, ironically related to the previous caller's question. And, we're having a difficult time communicating about it because he mentions that the Catholic idea of baptism is non-biblical, and that, and of course he criticizes infant baptism. And I was wondering, maybe if you could speak to that, as if you were having a conversation with somebody from that tradition, how would you present the Catholic view and how it is actually deeply based in Scripture?
Okay. I'd say a number of things. One thing that I would say to kind of recontextualize the discussion a little bit is to say this isn't a Catholic versus a Protestant position here. This is virtually everybody in historic Christianity except Baptists. So Catholics accept infant baptism, Eastern Orthodox accept infant baptism, all of the historic Eastern churches do, and Anglicans do, and Methodists do, and Presbyterians do, and Lutherans do. And so this is basically everybody except those coming from the Anabaptist tradition and the Baptist tradition. You want to recognize that there are a lot of people who you as a Baptist would recognize as fellow Christians who believe this. So this is a common position among Christians. In fact, it's the majority position among Christians. Having said that, that should give us reason to take seriously the arguments that are proposed by all of these different groups of Christians to support the practice. And if we're looking in terms of Scripture, there are passages that do this. Now, sometimes people will point to instances where, like in Luke's Gospel, it says they were bringing even babies to be blessed by Jesus. And it uses the word for infants, for an infant, brephos, or in the plural, brephoi. And when the disciples try to stop them from being brought to them, he says, of such is the kingdom of God. Well, now, some people are quick to point out, well, they don't then baptize them. And that's true, they don't in this passage. But we see a similar line of reasoning used in conjunction with baptism later on in the book of Acts, after baptism had been publicly proclaimed in the name of Jesus as the way to become his follower. In Acts chapter 10, when the Gentiles in Cornelius' household experience the Holy Spirit, Peter realizes they're fit for the kingdom. We need to baptize them. And so after the public proclamation of baptism as the way to become one of Jesus' followers, it would make sense to baptize them. Unfortunately, I'm hearing the music, which means I can't give you much more data, but we have good information on this at Catholic.com. There's a lot more I could say. In particular, I would go to Colossians chapter 2, where baptism is called the circumcision of Christ, and circumcision was something applied both to infants and adults to make you part of the Old Covenant. So baptism, its equivalent, is applied to infants and adults to make you part of the New Covenant. But check out Catholic.com, where we have a lot more to say on that subject.
Thank you very much, Troy. Thank you all of our callers. Another hour of open forum coming up right after this with Jim Blackburn. So if you are on the line, please stay on the line. And if you would like to dial and get in the queue, 888-318-7884 is the number, 888-31-TRUTH. Thank you very much, Jimmy Akin.
Thank you very much, Cy Kellett, with your new haircut.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I feel much lighter. I have a light head now. That's my summer haircut. All right, see you in a little bit. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live.
Oh, well, hello there.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Second hour of Catholic Answers Live. Open forum today. Any question that you have on the life, the faith, the history, the traditions, the teachings, the moral instructions of the Catholic Church, we're happy to take all of those. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and our guest this hour, Jim Blackburn, longtime apologist, noted speaker, and author. Jim, thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here, Cy.
And Jim, when I say speaker, like anything this summer, or are you chilling this summer? Are you out on the road speaking at all? Or are you?
I have exhausted my summer schedule, so I do not have anything else scheduled for the summer that I can think of. I think the next thing I have coming up is in either late August or early September. So I'm available if anybody's looking for a speaker. I'd love to come speak on just about any topic related to the Catholic faith.
And as you will see with Jim, that's his answers will be a recommendation for him as we go. Maybe you should say your website.
JimBlackburn.org is my blog site. I haven't contributed a whole lot to it, but there's a little bit there. My contact information is there. Also, a lot of things that like if I'm going to be speaking at a public venue, I usually post it on Facebook. and you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/BlackburnJim.
Very good. And you can also, you're a Catholic Answers speaker, so you can just come through Catholic.com and find out how to have Jim come to your parish or event and speak. Open forum, Jim. Do you feel ready to take any question on any aspect of the life and faith of the church this hour?
Ready as I'll ever be. So let's give it a go.
Yeah, because we have full lines, so let's work our way through these. Elaine in Charleston, South Carolina, listening on 7:30 a.m. Your question for Jim Blackburn.
Jim Blackburn. Yes. Before I ask the question on your last hour, I just wanted to give you some quick info on Pennsylvania 65000.
Oh.
That was just so you know, that was Glenn Miller. And as the story goes, he received a phone call from a young girl that had eyes for him, and his mother gave him the phone number, and he kept on saying the number over and over again so that he'd remember it. So he ran up to the phone to call her, and then he ended up by marrying her.
I'm glad you told us that. Because, Jim, you may not know what any of this is about, but I was talking with Jimmy Aiken last hour, and we were talking about phone numbers for some reason. I don't know. You end up when you're talking with Jimmy, it can get a little off the beaten path. And we were just mentioning the song Pennsylvania 65000, and neither of us knew what it was referring to. And so, thank you very much. You waited a long time to fill us in, Elaine. I appreciate it. Your question for Jim?
Okay. Now, hopefully, I've written it down, so hopefully it'll make total sense. But I was listening. I listen to Catholic radio a lot, and I heard a speaker talk about the consecration and Christ not dying each time. So just bear with me with the question. The statement to my question. So during the celebration of the consecration at Mass, I heard that at Mass Christ does not revisit his death, and knowing that Christ's body and blood is his body and blood, and not just the representation as some believe. I don't understand how to separate the past and present of the consecration so that I can. Does that make sense?
I think I have the idea of what you're asking, and here's how I would approach it. I would say first, yes, you're correct that Christ does not die every time the Eucharist is celebrated. That's a misunderstanding of what happens in the Eucharist. That's largely a Protestant misunderstanding of what the Catholic Church teaches on this. But it's also not just a symbol of what happened on Calvary, and it's not just a symbol of Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity. It actually becomes it. And the way the Church explains this is what happens during the consecration and during the Eucharistic celebration is that through the power of God, through the Holy Spirit, that sacrifice that Christ made for us on Calvary is being made present for us again. It's being represented. It's not a representation as though it's a symbol. It's a representation as though what happened at a certain point in time from our perspective is made present to us again. It's not happening again. It's almost as though we go to that time, but God is outside of time. So, in a real sense, God can make present what He has accomplished for us at a particular point in time from our perspective. He can make that present for us at any time along our timeline from our perspective, and that's what happens during the Mass. That sacrifice that Christ made is being made present for us. For our advantage, for our benefit. And that sacrifice is indeed the real presence of the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. The bread and the wine, the appearances remain, but the bread and the wine are transubstantiated into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. And so that's what we are consuming when we eat and drink of the Eucharist. So if you would like to read more details about what the Catholic Church teaches on this, there's just a very simple place to go would be the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I know paragraph 1330 in particular, and the surrounding paragraphs, talk about this sacrifice of Christ and his body, blood, soul, and divinity being made present for us again at the Eucharistic celebration. It's not as though we are killing him again and doing this all over again. No, what happened once is being made present for us in our time. Okay, does that help?
I do understand, but I'll go back and I'll read it because I understand logically. I understand what you're saying. I'm just trying to make sense of it.
Okay. Well,
but I'll go back and I'll reread it.
But Elaine, you know it's a great mystery. I mean, you don't come to a perfect dispositive understanding of it. It's you have what Jim gives you is a way of advancing your understanding, but we don't have a perfect final understanding of this great mystery.
No, and I understand that. It was just when I heard it before, when they were talking about it, I just always assumed, I took for granted during the consecration that it was all happening again, and then they were saying it's not happening again. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the whole thing.
Yes, and maybe it might be helpful to look at it this way. When we say happening again, it would be as though, well, it happened once, now it's happening twice, and then it's happening a third time and a fourth time. That's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is it happened once, and that one happening, that one time that it occurred, is now present to us. So it's as though as some people, and this isn't a perfect explanation, but it's as though we're transported back in time to when it happened, and we are there when it actually took place, at Calvary. But it's kind of the flip of that, whereas what happened at Calvary is traveling forward in time to our time and is now present where we are when we're celebrating the Eucharist. Again, that's a very rough analogy, but it might help. We don't want to say that it's happening again as though it's happening a second time and a third time or a billionth time, as many times as the Eucharist has been celebrated over the history of the Church. No, Christ died once for the forgiveness of our sins, but that sacrifice is made present for us whenever we need it, and it's made present for us in the Eucharist.
Elaine, thank you very, very much for that call. We go now to Drew in Phoenix, Arizona, listening to EWTN on Sirius Satellite Radio. We might have to hold the answer over after the break, Drew, but I want to see, is this my own personal good friend, Drew, the teller of dangerous truths?
It's the teller of dangerous truths from the desert as an added bonus.
So, Drew, do you mind asking your question of Jim, and then we'll probably do the answer after the break?
Sure, that'd be great. But before I ask the question, can I just say, I really wanted to let you know how much I appreciate your novel, Ad Limina, and the great work you do on Catholic Answers Focus, those podcasts you do every week. They're really great, and I've really enjoyed them as a great witness to the gospel.
Thank you very
much. But my question, is that dangerous enough? So then the question I had was about the proper relationship of Catholics to wealth, and I was wondering about the very idea of wealth as kind of anti-Eucharistic, and because it takes creation and turns it into things to be accumulated, bought, sold, traded for our own either comfort or power or things like that. And it struck me as being a fundamentally anti-Eucharistic notion. And I was just wondering what thoughts Mr. Blackburn might have with regard to how to guide us as Catholics in thinking about that and participating into that reality when it's such a central issue in the United States.
Yeah, okay, so we'll talk about wealth. Thanks, Drew. We'll talk about wealth when we come back right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Don't you just love listening to Jim Blackburn? Did you know you can book Jim or any of our other great speakers to speak at your parish or special event? Contact one of our seminar coordinators through the Speakers Bureau section on Catholic.com today to find out more information.
Howdy folks, this is Jimmy Akin, and I'm here to tell you about a very special promotion we look forward to every year. It's our annual store-wide summer sale in the online shop at Catholic.com. This online event features savings from 10 to 50% and more in some cases on every book, tract, CD, DVD, ebook, and MP3 we carry, including my newest book, A Daily Defense. With lower prices and a great selection of solid Catholic resources, it's a sale you can't afford to miss. So log on now and all this month month at shop.catholic.com and take advantage of our very special prices. You know it's all good stuff because it's from the people you know and trust at Catholic Answers. That's shop.catholic.com.
As legend goes, it was 500 years ago that Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral, setting of a series of ruptures that the Church suffers to this very day. Catholic Answers magazine is marking the anniversary with our very special issue delving deep into the Protestant Reformation. Want to be sure to get your copy? Subscribe right now to the best Catholic apologetics magazine anywhere by calling 818-487-2011 or going to Catholic.com. The heroes of the Counter-Reformation, the deadly errors of sola fide, and everything you want to know about how the Reformation played out. Just a few of the articles you can look forward to. Don't wait another moment to subscribe. Call 818-487-2011 or go to the shop at Catholic.com right now to get subscriptions for yourself and those you love. Share the faith. Defend the faith. Catholic Answers magazine from Catholic Answers, the most trusted name in Catholic apologetics.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Thursdays are so much fun. Open forum. We get to talk about all kinds of things. 888-318-7884 is that number if you would like to call. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest this hour, Jim Blackburn, apologist, speaker, and writer extraordinaire. And my good friend Drew at the break asked about wealth. Can I just say something real quick before I go to your answer? It just so happens, and Drew did not know this, just today we recorded a really cool interview with Andreas Widmer, who is an entrepreneur and now teaches at Catholic University on this very topic. So if you don't get Catholic Answers Focus, get it this week. Start getting it. It's every week we have these just wonderful guests who do these wonderful interviews. So if you want to have a full, almost 1 hour interview on the Catholic view on wealth in the modern world, Andreas Widmer is a great person to talk about that. And now I will turn it over to you, Jim Blackburn.
Maybe you should just hit the play button on that interview and
it's an hour, Jim.
Oh, okay.
No, it's 45 minutes, but yeah.
Then let me in just a much more briefly let me give just an overview of the Catholic perspective on this. And Drew, the first thing I would point out is that God created us in a physical world. He created us in a world where there is matter. In fact, even our bodies are made up of matter. Human beings are not pure spirits. We're a body-spirit composite, a body-soul composite. And our bodies need matter in the world, not just to exist, but to live and to thrive and to eat and breathe, and we need shelter. We need these things. So things are not bad. Matter is not bad. Accumulation of these things to take care of ourselves, to take care of others, is necessary. So the question really becomes, when is accumulation of these things and money, I'm including in this, when does that become a problem? Does it ever become a problem? And certainly it does. If accumulation of possessions and accumulation of wealth, of money, becomes our focus and our goal, as it said, the love of money is the root of evil. Well, if this becomes our goal and what we love, if it becomes what it is that we seek after, more than what we should be seeking after, which is eternal life, which is a relationship with God and our relationships with others, then it becomes problematic. We need to keep in mind that Jesus said the greatest commandment is to love God with all our hearts, all our souls, all our minds. And the second greatest commandment is to love our neighbors as ourselves. If we're keeping those two commandments really in mind, which Jesus said all of the other commandments really fall under these two. If we're keeping these two most important commandments in mind, as we accumulate things, as we make money, as we buy things, then we and we approach our wealth from that perspective, which oftentimes can mean we are caring for others with our own wealth. We're not accumulating wealth for the sake of wealth, but we may accumulate it for the sake of others, for the sake of helping others. We might become a philanthropist if we're blessed with really great wealth. But wealth itself and things and money isn't bad. These things aren't bad, provided we keep a proper perspective on them in our own lives. So if Drew still on the line?
I think so. Drew?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay, I was just going to see if maybe you had a follow-up on that. Did I address the...
If you don't mind. Thank you. And maybe I framed the question poorly, and I certainly understand, and I appreciate
Drew, it's really hard for us to hear you. I don't know if you're going through a spot where your phone's not working or what. Drew, give it a try again, speaking directly into the phone. I know you're probably already doing that, but it's just really hard to hear you right now.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and I'm sorry for taking up so much time, and I appreciate your patience. So I appreciate what you're saying there about that, but I think my question was about really the actual notion of wealth, where it seems like what's inherent in the notion of wealth is turning creation itself, these gifts of God, into things for us to manipulate and use for our own wills rather than the will of God. And that I'm wondering about the central sort of example of proper relationship of ourselves, as you sort of listed there, between ourselves and creation, is really the Eucharist. And so that's the proper model for how we interact with creation in order to give glory to God and cooperate in God's kingdom.
Jim?
Okay. Yeah, that's a nice follow-up. I'm not sure I heard a question there, though.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm gonna have to. I'm reluctant to go back just because of the sound quality not good. But it struck me that the question has to do with the manipulating of nature for our purposes instead of God's purposes.
Yes. Okay. And the question being, is that problematic?
Yeah. Is that a problem? Especially. Yeah. Right.
And I would say it can become problematic. I mean, if we're keeping in mind the ultimate goal of what our lives are all about, and that is loving God and loving others. If we're keeping that in mind and living our lives according to those commandments, then this accumulation of wealth, this even the going after it and trying to drum up business to make more money and these kinds of things. If our reasoning behind this, if our what motivates us to do this is our love of God and our love of neighbor, then that can be a wonderfully good thing. Yeah, Jesus gave the example of when on the steps of the temple. This is a mass reading at Mass recently, where the woman who goes up and she gives would be seen as a very small amount of money, and she was giving this as a gift at the temple. This is Jesus said that she gave more than those who gave far greater amounts of money because she had so little to begin with. Well, the same thing we can look at this as, from our perspective today. Those who have much ought to be giving much. And I don't mean necessarily donating more to the church or whatever, in a particular way, but they ought to be doing what they can with their wealth for the ultimate goal of their own salvation and the salvation of others. If they're approaching it that way, then it's a good thing. I hope that helps, and Drew, I hope that got to somewhat to the root of your question, and if not, then I hope, Cy, that the interview that you did this morning will be more helpful.
Oh, thanks for plugging Focus again, Jim.
Okay.
That's what I wanted. Catholic.com/focus. We do it every week, and fascinating people there. And they're archived there as well. So if you want to go back and listen to earlier Focus interviews, get them there. Catholic.com/focus. We go now to Jake in Temple, Texas, watching on YouTube. Jake, thanks for watching on YouTube. Your question for Jim Blackburn.
Hi, yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right. So, I was an ex-Mormon. I'm an ex-Mormon. Now I'm Catholic. I came into this church this past Easter, and I was curious how the Catholic Church interprets the verse John 14:28 in Jesus' statement about the Father being greater than him.
Okay. Do you have that passage in front of you that you could read that? Or I could
Yes,
pull this
I
up.
do. Do you want me to read it out for you?
Sure.
Okay. So it says, "You heard me say, I am going away, and I am coming back to you. If you loved me, you would be glad that I am going to the Father, for the Father is greater than I."
Okay. Okay, so your question is, I assume since you mentioned you're from a Mormon perspective, for a Mormon background, an ex-Mormon, that does this somehow then indicate that Jesus is not equal to the Father? He's not God. Is that what you're?
Yeah, exactly. I was taught that this proves that Jesus is subordinate, and now, or is subordinate to the Father. And now, as a Catholic, I'm wondering how the Catholic Church interprets that verse.
Okay, I'm not sure that the Catholic Church has a specific interpretation of this verse. In fact, I checked the Catechism, and in the back of the Catechism, there's a reference where you can look up any Bible verse and see if it's a reference in the Catechism. I don't think this one is, not that I can recall. But that said, how can we understand this? And there are a couple of different approaches to this. Number one, we need to keep in mind that Jesus is God incarnate. He has a human soul and he has a divine soul. Paul tells us that in his humanity, Jesus, he really hid his divinity in a certain way. He did this because his friends wouldn't be able to comprehend his greatness really if he didn't do this, and he emptied himself, as Paul says. Well, so we could look at this as though Jesus is coming from his human perspective. He's not a human person here, but the human incarnation of the second person of the Trinity, and through his humanity, his divinity and the Father's divinity is greater than his humanity. Now that's one way that some Bible commentators will look at this and point out how Jesus can make such a bold statement. Another perspective, if we were to say, well, Jesus is coming from the perspective of his divinity, is that in Catholic theology and in Christian theology going way back, the very first several centuries of the Church, really the divinity of Christ and the divinity of the Father, the divinity of the Holy Spirit, how this all relates was a very big topic, and it took centuries for these things to be ironed out. And I hear music as we go into a break. Let me pick it up from there after the break.
Fair enough. We will pick it up right there where we left it off when we come back from the break. Open forum, still a half hour left. If you've got a question and you want to get in on the queue, give us a call, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live, and we'll be right back.
Catholic Answers Live.
Christian men, beware. With the idols of materialism, entertainment, and the flesh, it's plain to see that the world wants you for its own. Face it, it's tempting and easy to be a man of the world. Father Terence Ehrman has a challenge for you. Be a man of God instead. In his new book, Man of God, Lessons to Young Men About Life, Sex, Friendship, Vocation, and Loving with the Heart of Christ, Father Ehrman draws on his experiences counseling men who are struggling to live in the world but not be of the world. In a unique format, he offers a plan for ongoing conversion, holy spiritual direction for all men who want to master themselves and be transformed from within. Order your copy of Man of God today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Trent Horn, and I'm here to tell you about my new book, Hard Sayings, a Catholic approach to answering Bible difficulties. Have you ever read something in the Bible that confused you? Or has a skeptic ever asked you to explain a scandalous passage and you didn't know what to say? Doesn't Genesis contradict science? Why does the Bible promote slavery? How could God order his people to kill women and children? It's happened to just about everyone. But now you have a place to turn for the answers. In Hard Sayings, I look at dozens of the most confounding passages in Scripture and offer clear, reasonable, and Catholic keys to unlocking their true meaning. After reading this book, you'll be equipped to answer the toughest questions skeptics ask about the Bible. So don't be left without an answer again. Order your copy of Hard Sayings today by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or by asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Colin Donovan.
Entering university, I had the religious understanding of someone catechized in the 1960s. That changed when a fellow freshman asked me if a Catholic could use the pill. My uninformed answer was, sure, why not? I then went and read Pope Paul VI's encyclical Humanae Vitae and concluded, this is truth. I've never looked back in my love of our Catholic faith since.
Open Line with Colin Donovan, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
I love that. I just want to listen to that music. I don't even want to talk over it. I just want to let you know our summer series continues this Sunday. Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett. That's me. I don't know why they had to write that on the script. I will be speaking Sunday on Christ and Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc is one of my favorite people. I'm looking forward to that talk. It's at St. Elizabeth Catholic Church up in Carlsbad at 6 p.m. Sunday evening. But this is one of those ones that if you can't attend the talk, you live outside San Diego or whatever, you can live stream it. You just go to our Catholic Answers Facebook page. Just go to Facebook, put Catholic Answers in there. You'll then find our Facebook page, and it'll give you directions on how to live stream that talk. And I think you can also stream the talks that other people have already given, right? Like Jimmy and Tim. And is that true? Ask Andrew for me real quick. Is that true that you can? Yes. So Andrew says yes. You can stream all that stuff. So that's cool. All that stuff has been archived. A lot of great summer talks going on so far. We were speaking, Jim Blackburn, when we left, to Jake in Temple, Texas, about what does the Catholic Church understand by Jesus' statement, "The Father is greater than I."
Yes, and in particular, we're talking about John 14. Verse 28. And I did look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and I could not find a reference for that. Before the break, I approached it from the perspective that many commentators do, in that Christ may be speaking in regard with regard to his human nature, not his divine nature. And of course, the divine nature of the Father is greater than the human nature of Christ. And that's one way of looking at this. Another way, though, that theologians will sometimes look at these types of statements of Christ would be that we could look at the Trinity itself. And in the Trinity, there is we could say, even though all three persons are equal, there's a certain, almost a hierarchy within the Trinity of the Father being the first person of the Trinity, the Son being the second person, and the Holy Spirit being the third person of the Trinity. They're even listed by first, second, and third persons. And in fact, we often will, when we look at this, look at it from this perspective, we see that that's really how we distinguish between the three persons of the Trinity, is their relationship with each other. The Son proceeds from, or is begotten of the Father, and the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. And these processions, the way that they relate to each other, we see the Father is in a very, very sense, from our perspective at least, first, the Son second, and the Holy Spirit. Even though they exist eternally as such, there's a certain ordering to the persons of the Trinity in this way. So sometimes a theologian will look at a statement of Jesus like this and relate it to on that divine level, rather than the difference between the human nature and the divine nature, human nature of Christ and the divine nature of the Father. So I hope that helps. And I would say, if you want to try to research this further, go to a good Catholic commentary and look up this verse in a good Catholic commentary, and I'm sure you'll find a lot more there.
Thanks very much, Jake. We go now to Sarah in Mansfield, Ohio, listening on Annunciation Radio. Sarah, your question for Jim Blackburn.
Yes. So my question is, I was listening to a podcast earlier this morning, and it was a priest talking about how they need to approach, the kids receiving confirmation a little bit differently than what we would 45 years ago, because we have a totally different culture than what we did back then. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about how there's, I'm 25 years old, and I'm kind of in the middle of a traditional generation and a modern generation, and I'm noticing that there's some churches or Catholic beliefs that are pretty modern, and I can see them going down kind of a slippery slope. So my question is how can I maintain the Catholic teachings and beliefs and recognize that the culture is changing and it is moving, and especially not only for me but the generation after me, where I feel like it's going to be even different.
Okay, sure. And Sarah, this is a good question. I think it touches on an issue that I found early on in my apologetics career, that we need to, and it helps, I think will help you, make a distinction between the teaching of the church and the practice of the church. A difference between what we could call, on one hand, the doctrine of the church, and on the other hand, the discipline of the church. In fact, so important I thought this was that I wrote an article on that. And if you go to Catholic.com and type in, is it a doctrine or a discipline, I think that article will be a good follow-up to what I'm going to say now. And that is that the teaching of the church is something that does not change. It does not change, at least in the sense that the church flip-flops on its teaching. And we'll teach in one age that this, and then in the next age teach the opposite of this. That does not happen. Certainly doctrine can develop over time as a church comes to understand it better and apply it to new situations over time. But the doctrine of the church is something that essentially has been handed on to the church by Christ and the apostles, and it's there for the church to safeguard from corruption and change, and to teach in every age and apply in every age. Now, on the other hand, there are disciplines in the church, and disciplines would be the way the church practices various different things over the history of time. You mentioned the sacrament of confirmation. The way that confirmation is celebrated has taken many different forms over the history of the church. The way many of the sacraments, penance is something that we would barely, people in the early century of the church would barely recognize penance, the sacrament of penance today. The changes have been made. Now, the teaching and the sacrament itself has not changed, but the way that we approach it, the way that it's taught, the way that we practice and administer the sacraments, those things have and do change over time. And that this could be what the priest was talking about, is that 45 years ago, or he may have been referring to right after Vatican II, shortly after Vatican II, a lot of things started changing. The way, the practices of the administration of the sacraments and such changed. there are certain elements that have always remained the same. For example, in baptism, we always baptize with water and in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Those kinds of things don't change. But whether it happens, in a river or it happens at a baptismal font in the church, those things can change and do change. The same thing with the sacrament of confirmation. The way it was celebrated many years ago, decades ago, may not be the way that it's approached today. So it could be a matter, and I suspect that to be the case here, that this is a matter of discipline that the priest was talking about, and not the teaching, the church's teaching on the sacrament of confirmation. Does that help, Sarah?
Yeah. If I can just ask kind of one follow-up, though.
Sure.
So that does help me out and answer my question. But one of my concerns that I run into a lot with some of my family and friends is the fact that after Vatican II, a lot of the churches got rid of the communion rails, and I never grew up with that as a practice, and we've always received it in the hands and standing and everything. But my only concern is that kneeling it has a certain aspect of reverence that I'm just kind of nervous that some people in the church might lose over time, and
Sure.
I'm just kind of curious how to not lose that.
Sure.
How to lose that,
and this is, and that, Sarah, many of the disciplines regarding the celebration of the Mass have changed since Vatican II, since shortly after Vatican II, when the Roman Missal was revised, in the late 60s and early 70s, when we have changes that have continued to happen to go on today. We'll see little changes here and there. These are things that many of people from a more traditional mindset don't like these changes. More of the younger generation do like these changes a lot. And just to give one example, well, you mentioned the communion rail. That's one. How about just the idea that Mass is now celebrated in the vernacular language? It's in our common language, not always celebrated in Latin. Many of the more traditionally minded people thought that would lead to less reverence and that there would be a falling away from the faith. On the other hand, people today a lot of people can't imagine going to Mass and hearing it celebrated in a language that they cannot understand. And they appreciate the fact that it's celebrated in the vernacular. Well, one thing that Pope Benedict did when he was Pope Benedict XVI, when he was the Pope, he instituted, or he made the Mass celebrated according to the old Missal, the 1969 Missal. He made that available again, and he said that anytime a priest wants to celebrate Mass according to that rite, he called that the extraordinary rite, then that can happen. A priest can do that. And many parishes have gone on to begin offering a Mass according to that older, more traditional rite, just for the sake of those who appreciate that and want that. So what I would say to you, Sarah, is if you see something, if you desire something, maybe you see something that has changed and you wish that it hadn't changed, you're free to speak up about that, mention it to your pastor, mention it to your bishop. And these are things that if there are enough people who would like to see a discipline changed, you can get it changed. Start a grassroots effort to get it changed, and maybe it'll happen. But one thing we don't want to fall into is the idea that because these changes have been made, the church has the right, the authority to make these changes. And if when they are changed, it doesn't somehow invalidate the Eucharist, invalidate the Mass, as pseudo-vacantists, those who don't recognize the authority of the Pope, sometimes will try to go down that road and say, well, the Mass isn't valid today because of the changes that were made after Vatican II. And that's just not the case. Jesus gave the apostles the authority to bind and to loose, and the church was always recognized. The Catechism mentions that with that, the church has the authority to make discipline changes and institute disciplines within the church. And this is, when we're talking about disciplines, we always have to keep in mind the church has the authority to make changes, and it's not going to somehow, just because we don't like it, doesn't mean it's going to invalidate what's happening at the Mass, for example. So I hope that helps, Sarah. Again, I encourage you to read the article, Is It a Doctrine or a Discipline? And then if you have more questions, contact me off the air or contact Catholic Answers and talk to an apologist about it further.
JimBlackburn.org is the place to get in touch with Jim. Sarah, thanks very much for that call. Call here anytime. We're happy to take those calls. We're going to take a quick break, however, and we'll be right back with more Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Wouldn't it be great to have a book to give to anyone to explain exactly why Catholics believe what we believe? The good news is that now there is. Why We're Catholic is the groundbreaking new resource by apologist Trent Horn, that one book you can hand to anyone as a starting point for helping them find their way into or back to the practice of the Catholic faith. Don't miss out on the most important, life-changing book to come along in years. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The Catholic Answers Minute. I'm Father Vincent Serpent. In Matthew 13:10, the disciples asked Jesus, "Why do you speak to the crowds in parables?" He replied, "Because knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven has been granted to you, but to them it has not been granted." That is why he spoke to them in parables, because they looked but did not see, and heard but did not listen or understand. They were simply not capable of absorbing all that he had to say. So he gave them what they could understand. So with us, he gives us what we can understand and need for the moment. This is probably why he doesn't tell us the future, and also why there is so much mystery in our lives. We are just not capable of understanding the whole picture now. Besides, the act of trusting him about what we don't understand does us much good. It provides us with another means of showing our love for him. I'm Father Vincent Serpa for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Last segment, so we'll try to move through the questions as quickly as we can. Jim Blackburn, our hope. Jim Blackburn, you are our only hope. You're even more than Princess Leia. I meant to say he's not our host either. He's our guest. I don't know why I said hope.
Thank you.
Jim, let me go quickly. Let me stop talking and go to Dan in Akron, Ohio, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Dan, your question for Jim Blackburn.
Yes, Jim. I was wondering, is Catholic doctrine teach that eventually most people, either through going directly to heaven or through purgatory, will eventually end up in heaven with Jesus? I can't imagine most people have deserved to burn up forever. Is there a doctrine on that?
Well, yeah, actually, there's not. The church, God hasn't revealed to the church how, what percentage of humanity will attain eternal life. And this is something that really Jesus, in his own words, he talks about how the gate to heaven is narrow, the path is narrow, which might indicate that that there will be few. We really don't know, though. There has been lots of speculation by theologians. Some theologians, even Catholic theologians, speculating that God will provide an opportunity for nearly everyone, if not everyone, at the point of death or before, to to attain salvation, and he will do so in such a way that they will accept that, they will embrace it. That's not a teaching of the church, though. The church teaches the fact of the reality of hell, but it's important to understand that hell is not God sending someone to hell. Hell, eternal separation of God, is a freely chosen state of eternity by the person who ends up in that state. It's not something that God chooses for that person, but because He allows us free will, it's something that it can be a reality for us. So it's important to recognize the reality of hell. I wrote a couple of articles on hell back many years ago. You can find these at Catholic.com. Hell Yes 1 and Hell Yes 2. It's a 2-part article. We recommend that you check that out just to understand, maybe get a better understanding of what hell is from a Catholic perspective, and that might then also help you understand how there could be people there, and how this is something that the church, while the church doesn't know who is in hell and has never taught that any particular individual is there, the church does recognize that it is a reality. Jesus clearly taught that it's a reality. Scripture clearly teaches that it's a reality. So you might want to check out those articles.
Does that help you, Dan?
Yeah, one quick follow-up, though. Something that's kind of had me wondering is, say a person grows up a Buddhist, never hears the name of Christ, they're a good person. It doesn't make any sense that person would be like a torch in Nero's garden forever. The person has no choice.
Dan, I agree with you, and the church would agree with you too, that God is not going to hold someone accountable for something that He innocently does not know. Now, certainly, God, He gives everyone who has the use of reason sufficient moral compass. I mean, we have written on the human heart certain things, knowing the difference between right and wrong in most matters. And this is something that Paul speaks of, and the church recognizes that. So even if you're not a Catholic, even if you've never heard of Christ Himself, there's a certain judgment that God can have about the way that you live your life and the choices that you make. And God will judge each person according to what he does know and according to how he responds to the graces that God provides him in his life. So the church teaches, in fact, this is around paragraph 1850 in the Catechism. You might have to go back a few or forward a few, but the church is teaching on salvation outside the church. The church teaches that all salvation comes through Christ and through the church, but those who are outside, or at least apparently outside the visible boundaries of the church, that they too may attain salvation through the church and through Christ, provided that they're responding to what God does present to them in their lives, what the graces that God gives them in their lives, and the knowledge that they do come to know. How they respond to those, you mentioned a Buddhist, for example, that is how that person will be judged, and whether that person will go to heaven or not. And heaven would certainly be a possibility for someone like that. But all the more reason, as the Catechism goes on to mention, all the more reason for us for this missionary mandate of the church, for us to spread the word of God to everyone so that they do know and can come to a fuller understanding of who God is and how to love God in this life and how to love others, so that they will have that promise of Christ directly and know it and be able to live by it. So I encourage you to go to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Again, I think might be paragraph 846, somewhere in there. It's where the church teaches, or the Catechism teaches, on salvation outside the church. And I'm just going to look this up real quick. Yeah, paragraph 846, and going forward from there, a couple of paragraphs. I think that'll be really helpful to you.
Thanks, Dan, very much for that call. Jim, I am joined in the studio here by our good friend Emily, and Emily has a question for you.
Okay. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Jim. Thanks so much. So my question is, how can I respond to someone who is incorporating New Age ideas of energy into their spiritual life? They're a good Catholic, but they have these ideas about like positive and negative energy, and I'm wondering how to reply to them.
Okay. The church, actually, the U.S. bishops have a document on Reiki that I think might be a good start. Reiki is this New Age idea that has a lot to do with what you're talking about, these different energies and such. And there is just simply no scientific grounding for this, no medical grounding for these things. There's no spiritual grounding for these ideas. These are just something that somebody came up with, interesting thoughts, but there's just no grounding for them. And in a sense, and you'll find this document on the U.S. Bishop's website, you can see how, in a sense, these ideas take away from the glory of God. That no, there aren't these energies. What we do have, though, are human souls, and what we do have is God working in our lives. We do have grace. We do have the spiritual gifts of the Holy Spirit and such. But to imagine somehow that there are these energies that we can manipulate to make things happen really takes away from what we owe to God. God's providence and God's power. So as a first step, Emily, I would recommend going to the U.S. Bishop's website and just type in Reiki, and you'll find just a really good article, I think, on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome.
Jim, do you see more and more? It seems that often there's a difficulty in today's world in distinguishing between what the church teaches, what Christ has given us, and then what's this kind of, received wisdom that's out there. Not always wisdom. Do you see more and more of that?
Well, I think with, let's just use yoga as an example. Well, Reiki, we already mentioned. Yoga is another one. I think that we as Catholics can look to these other thoughts, ideas, practices, and glean from them what is truly good. And there have been Catholic practitioners of yoga who have done this, who have brought the physical aspects of yoga in, but then thrown the spiritual out, maybe replaced it with a Catholic spirituality. I think if we're doing that, that can be okay. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of that, people trying to mesh these things together when oftentimes they don't. They contradict each other.
Jim Blackburn, thanks very much for a great hour. Thanks to all our callers. Thanks, Emily. Thanks all the guys in the booth, Nick and Andrew and Nathan, whose mom called, and Robert. And it takes a lot of people to put this show together. Tomorrow, Navigating the Tiber with Devin Rose for the first hour. Second hour, the mighty Carlo Broussard in here, Catholic Answers to Protestant Questions. JimBlackburn.org is where they can find you, right?
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Si.
Thanks very much, Jim. God bless you, too. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, on Catholic Answers Live.